So very early on, our goal before Google became a route to market. You're really trying to grab the attention of the media through PR. So we did put a lot of energy into PR to dig up these stories. And the first story that kind of made me sit up was we discovered from a US business broker. So we were huge in America in 1999, 2000. In fact, most of our market on businesses for sale was American. Why? Because the Americans in 1999, 2000 had embraced the internet more boldly than anyone else. And we had a business broker. A business broker is someone that sells businesses professionally for a living. So they're like a real estate agent. We were reaching out, looking for stories, and he said he'd sold a chain of gas stations, 3 gas stations, via businesses for sale to a buyer from Sweden. And I do remember thinking, well, what's going on with the own activity on our own website? Because that actually blew my mind.
Anyone who's turned 30 will tell you that it's a pretty big milestone. For some people, it's an excuse to have an existential crisis, but for other people, it's a chance to reflect on what's come before and the lessons learned along the way. That's exactly what we're going to be doing today, because we are joined on the first episode of the new businessesforsale.com podcast by CEO Andrew Markou and Chairman Marcus Markou, because businessesforsale.com has just turned 30. So we're going to be chatting about the history of the business, and we're also going to be looking forwards to the future. We'll be talking about an exciting rebrand of the website, and that comes just in time for our birthday as well. And finally, we'll be looking towards the next 30 years of business buying and how the emergence of AI might change the landscape. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Very well.
Very good, thank you, Stuart. Are you well?
I'm good. I'm good. So let's start kind of back to the beginning a little bit if we're going to talk about the history of the business. So I remember you saying when you first registered the domain, people were saying that nobody would want to buy a business online. Does it feel like we're kind of in another one of those moments now with AI? And what do you remember about that moment? How do you kind of chart where we got to from there?
I mean, it started the business as a magazine called Businesses and Premises for Sale, which emerged from our father's accountancy practice. He had a lot of clients who were coming to that point of retirement and they didn't know what to do with the business. And my father, being their accountant, started a photocopied news sheet that effectively detailed the businesses for sale: pubs, restaurants, hair salons, a lot of fish and chip shops, because my dad was Greek Cypriot and there were a lot of Greek Cypriots running fish and chip shops back then. And the website, the domain, was registered at the end of 95, and Andrew launched the first website, businessesforsale.com, in 1996, really as a promotional additional sales tool to the magazine. So if you advertised your business in the magazine, then it would be for free on the website. And I think, we were very much ahead of the game in terms of what we felt the internet would become.
I think so, that's right. It was definitely started as an adjunctive thing to the paper. It was paper first back then, but it wasn't long before we realized, well, the writing was on the wall. The writing was in the paper. That paper was going to be dead and the internet was going to take over. But that took a good couple of years from 1996 up to, and it all coincided with the dot-com bubble. So we are veterans of that era and that period. So we really did have a foot in both worlds, old media and what was known then as new media. We don't say new media anymore, funnily enough. It's just, or new economy. It's just the economy and it's just media, right? But back then it was new media and the new economy.
And I do remember gathering a lot of the UK business brokers. A business broker is effectively like a commercial agent that sells businesses. And we did gather them in one space. I think it was about 1998 or 1999. And we did say the internet is the future. So that was 3 years after we'd registered the website. And we were effectively going to give up the print publication and go fully online. And there was a lot of cynicism. Like, no one in 1999 in the UK believed at all that the internet would, in inverted commas, take off. And in fact, even when we raised the money, as Andrew said, we were part of the first dot-com boom, and we had about 50 high net worth investors that put money into businessesforsale.com in 2000. When the bubble burst in 2001, a lot of investors felt this was flash in the pan. And again, there was a re-emergence of that cynicism, which you're alluding to now with AI. And I think there are constant waves of cynicism throughout these tech developments throughout human history. And you go right back to the printing press that started it all, and the cynicism around that, or even how the cynicism towards machinery, and you had the Luddite movement. I think human history is a constant drive for technological innovation and fear, like the fear of the motor car putting thousands of people out of work who were in the horse and carriage business, not seeing how many jobs would be created from the automotive industry is an example.
I think I was watching a video yesterday about how people were talking about the impact of social media on your brain, and they think they quoted something that people thought novels were going to be too addictive when they first, the concept of a novel was first kind of emerging. Yeah. It was an interesting kind of, parallel to where we're at now.
Well, especially with screen addiction being what it is, and the addictive nature of the screen. Yeah, I think there's always been a propensity to overestimate in the short term, which then creates a false impression, and people obviously get disillusioned. But then there's always the long-term underestimation of the impact. So all the things that were being talked about in the late 90s did come to fruition. It just took a bit longer than initially what the market, the investors thought it would take in terms of time. And yeah, we were quite unusual, and still unusual, I think, for being as old as we are and still having the same ownership corporate structure as we had back in the late 90s to what we have today. It's quite unusual, I think.
And I think that's a subject I think you wanted to discuss, which was the kind of cultural environment of the company. And it's interesting that when Andrew and I raised money for businessesforsale.com in 2000, there was this idea that it was quick, that you would go in, you'd invest in 2000, you'd float the company in 2001, and the investors would make 3 times their money. And even the staff that were joining the company at that point were thinking in short term. Like, I go in, I get a bit of equity, the company gets its event, and we're out within 3 years. And it seems to be a constant, but I think entrepreneurship is a constant battle against this culture of quick return. And it's not quick. It's why we're here talking to you after 30 years. And I remember saying to one investor, and Andrew remembers this very well, that he said, "What's your 5-year exit plan?" I said, "I don't have a 5-year exit plan. I look at companies like Tesco." I think I used it at the time. There was the guy who started Tesco was Jack Cohen, I think. Yeah. And it was a family business. And they, for the first 30 years, they're just a small family business before they expand. And I used that as an example. I said, even though it's technology, even though there's this anticipation of a quick return, I still saw our business in terms of a traditional family business that would spend the first 30 years growing as a traditional family business before it expanded again and became more corporate. And that was lost on basically most of the first group of employees who wanted in and out, and the investors who wanted in and out. And it doesn't work like that.
So we're kind of moving from one phase to another phase now, and it's timing quite nicely with the rebrand of the website as well. So can you kind of talk a bit about what's coming with the rebrand of businessesforsale.com? And is it just a kind of a visual change, or is it more of a philosophical change of like how we operate as a company and the culture of the company?
I think it's going to be both. I think it's been driven by both. All brands change over time, and the landscape has changed. We've lived through as a business the advent of broadband and the impact that changed, the growth of Google and SEO and what that means for every business on earth in terms of how one markets their business and reaches their audience and their market. The advent of mobile, we've lived through that, and that had seismic big changes. And now the advent of AI, which arguably could be the biggest kind of transformational change in all of those technologies we just mentioned. So the rebrand really is for us to reassess how we present to the world and how we look as a 30-year-old, which in .com terms is a dinosaur, right? It's from the Jurassic period.
And in fact, on Wikipedia, we're listed as in Wikipedia as under the category web properties established in 1996. And if you look at that list, it's only like a couple hundred there, and half of them have gone. So, you know, it really is a remarkable achievement. I'd also add that the rebrand does reflect a maturity of the business, in that we really started off as a classified listings website, no different to Auto Trader for cars, for example. And what we've become is a kind of a deeper sort of experience for the business buyer or seller. Why? Because buying or selling a business is a life-changing event. No different to getting married, having children, buying a house, right? It's a big event for most people. And you won't do that very often in your life, i.e. to become a business owner or to realize your wealth by selling your business. And so the rebrand effectively reflects a deeper journey that we go on with our business buyers and our business sellers. And so the rebrand reflects that deeper connection that we have with both buyers and sellers. So it's not just a classified site. We can talk about the importance of valuation, right? And how a buyer and a seller have to get valuation right before they engage in the process of buying or selling. Or even if you go before valuation, what business does a buyer want to buy? Potentially, most people come to businessesforsale.com with an idea of what they want to buy, and they end up buying something completely different because they're going on that journey of self-discovery. So there's so many aspects to buying or selling a business. Structuring the business correctly for a sale is hugely important, and that requires a deeper journey. And I think the rebrand reflects that we're not just a classified advertising site.
Going beyond classifieds and, moving from marketplace to platform could be part of the transformational aspects, and the rebrand helps kind of epitomize and crystallize that. I also think as well, our tech is in places quite old. So it's not just going to be a lick of paint. We're doing a kind of ground up restructuring in tech parlance, a refactor to ensure that, we're building ourselves for the next 30 years. Yeah.
And Marcus, you mentioned that one of the kind of strengths of BFS is that people don't often know exactly what they're looking for, and they might come to the site and they'll find all kinds of things. And that's something that's a bit lost in the age of AI, where you often will get what you kind of ask for to a huge amount of detail. But if you don't know what that is, what are some of your favorite businesses that have sold on the site in the past 30 years?
Well, very early on, when we raised the money, we raised £1.7 million in 2000 from about 50 high net worth individuals who wanted to back this thing called the internet. And so very early on, our goal, before Google became a route to market, you're really trying to grab the attention of the media through PR. So we did put a lot of energy into PR to dig up these stories. And the first story that kind of made me sit up was we discovered from a US business broker. So we were huge in America in 1999, 2000. In fact, most of our market on Businesses for Sale was American. Why? Because the Americans in 1999, 2000 had embraced the internet more boldly than anyone else. And we had a business broker. A business broker is someone that sells businesses professionally for a living. So they're like a real estate agent. We were reaching out, looking for stories, and he said he'd sold a chain of gas stations, 3 gas stations, via businesses for sale to a buyer from Sweden. And I do remember thinking, well, I don't even what's going on with the own activity on our own website? Because that actually blew my mind. And that was after we'd raised the money. And we're now starting to understand, what are we sitting on, really? What activity are we sitting on? Now, that started a endless stream of crazy stories about how people were jumping across nations, buying really unique businesses that you wouldn't even consider, and changing their lives dramatically. So, we had a toll booth for sale in China. We had a Romanian airport for sale. We've had haunted museums. We've had beaches. We had Thwaites and Reed, the world's oldest clockmaker and maintainers of Big Ben, for sale, as well as fish and chip shops and pubs and restaurants and bars, the usual fare. But what was interesting was seeing how people were uprooting their lives, maybe sometimes jumping across national boundaries and starting a completely new life with a business or a business opportunity that would seem at times unusual. So we had like people going to Australia to buy a bungee jumping business, for example. So this became a cultural thing where we took advantage of that, which was like, in the early days, our PR was like, escape the rat race, buy a pet shop. That was the kind of early PR message, which was that you could downshift as well. Downshifting was a big phase, or you sell your house in London and release the equity and then go buy that amazing hotel on the Isle of Skye, and that came with accommodation. So you could completely reboot or re-engineer your life. And then that became a huge part of our early PR. And it's something that is still happening today.
It's globalization, isn't it? The internet is a symptom or a cause of globalization. And we're a very small part of that in terms of how people can transform their lives from one nation to another.
It must be quite gratifying when you kind of see the thing that you've built grow to the scale where people can then change their entire life by moving to an entirely different country.
The constant surprise, like going back to that bit of information that said that you had a buyer from Sweden buying a chain of gas stations in America, is happening so often. And I only often hear about it anecdotally because a friend of mine has said, I went on your website just browsing. And in one case, I had a friend who I used to work with before businessesforsale.com. And he said, I was browsing on your site, thinking of what kind of business I'd like to buy. And he came across a pet accessories wholesaler. And he loved pets. And he saw in the details that they had the contract with Harrods to supply like high-end accessories. So Diamante collars for cats and dogs. And he ended up buying that business based on the idea that it had this contract. And now that's a really interesting insight, which is like that like you would never go sit down with a blank piece of paper and go, oh, I'm going to buy a pet accessories business wholesaler that has the exclusive right to distribute in Harrods. You would never do that. You would only do that once you came across that business and thought, hang on a minute, this is a really good business opportunity because of the relationship the wholesaler had with the retailer, which in this case was Harrods.
And also, you might, to even get to that point in the first place, you kind of have to know that buying a business might be an option. And some people don't know that because it's not really taught in schools necessarily.
That's entrepreneurship,
isn't
it? In terms of it comes from without and it gets induced from within. So we give that opportunity throughout 60,000 businesses for sale that are on the site. And I think part of that moving to another country, at some point, we see ourselves a bit like travel agents. We allow people to make a move, but it doesn't come as a prescriptive, pre-designed ambition. The ambition is induced by the opportunities ultimately, and it's our job to have the world's largest group of opportunities.
That's right. That becomes our key goal, to have the biggest marketplace of business opportunities anywhere on the planet. And what we're also doing, as well as being travel agents, we're operating some kind of time machine, which is this, and it's Andrew's phrase, like buying a business is a time machine. Most people approach business ownership through the lens of starting a business, and we see it on TV shows like Dragon's Den. And most people's idea of business ownership is starting a business. What people don't realize is that once a business has gone past its 5-year anniversary or its 10-year anniversary, it's outlived 80% of all the startups that fail. When you buy a business, you are buying reliability, success. As an Andrew's phrase is, it's like a time machine. You're basically cutting out those 5-10 years of graft and pain and all the hoops you have to jump through as someone that's starting a business. The other thing is, when you're buying a business that's been established 5 years or 10 years, that's got good audited accounts, guess what? You can approach a bank and borrow the money to buy the business. And that is the key. That is the idea that most people don't really know about. When you look at all the world's best entrepreneurs, biggest entrepreneurs, whether they're Elon Musk or Richard Branson, or Rupert Murdoch, right? You look at all of these big, all they've done is leverage debt to buy a business. That's what they're doing.
Build scale through acquisition.
And what we're saying with businessesforsale.com is you can apply the exact same principles to buy your business, whether it's a podcast studio or a pub or a restaurant or an engineering business or a PR company or an advertising agency or a pet shop or a wholesaler or distributor or retailer. You know, it's endless.
Yeah, I mean, in modern day parlance, you're buying someone else's product market fit. It's someone else's pivot, as it were. And you're skipping a lot of that energy, investment, hard work, sweat, blood, and tears by buying it more ready-made. And
the key is, it's not just your own money. Yes, you probably need to find about 30% to anchor it as a deposit, but you're using the bank's money to do it. And that's the key, right? When that's the thing that most people miss, because when you go to a bank and say, look, I'm buying a really good business, the bank will say to you, well, what makes it a good business? And this is part of the process, right, of buying a business. You say, well, this is what makes it a good business. Look at the audited accounts. Look at the track history. Look at what I'm buying. Bank goes, bank needs to lend money. That's how they survive. They go, well, I can give you the money to buy that business. Good luck. Go for it.
It's interesting. You're saying about the time travel of buying a business. It's just as much about buying the stability, isn't it, as it is the kind of dream of moving to another country. I mean, they're both just as powerful kind of stories, but people nowadays just as much want that stability from buying a business and kind of buying yourself a job, but one that you can do and that you can grow into something, hopefully that
strength in
lasts for 30
predictability.
Years. Yeah. You mentioned valuation earlier, which is a really key part of the business buying process. What do you think people most often get wrong about business valuation?
Well, I think, to really cut a very long story short, the value of a business is priced as what a buyer is prepared to pay for it. And ultimately, that is what counts. And there's lots of reasons why a certain price will be what it will be in the transaction's value. But before you can start the conversation, I think it's important that you can get some sound groundings with being able to reference a methodology, a system, if you will, that allows you to work out what a value of a business might be. And I think it's a key word, the might be. It's contingent on so many factors. So what we did a few years back is we thought, well, people are constantly trying to ask, well, what is my business worth? So we needed to come up with a methodology. And we landed on a system that's embodied in ValueRight, which is an online system we built, proprietary system, in and around the SDE valuation model, the seller's discretionary earnings model. So we focus on the cash flow that a given business can generate, and we work off a valuation of that cash flow, which isn't overly too dissimilar from a discounted cash flow valuation, but we look at historical near-term cash generation and try and model. Now, I think what people get wrong a lot of the time as sellers, and I could be guilty as a potential seller and owner of a business, is an overestimation on what my business is going to be worth, or feeling that my business is going to be priced strategically because it's a must-have purchase or acquisition by a very deep-pocketed acquirer. The reality is for most businesses, the deep-pocketed acquirer who needs to make a strategic acquisition of business is simply not going to be there. So what we try and focus on with Value Right and SDE is a realistic expectation of what your business is going to be worth. So you as a seller can be prepared to understand that actually, with all things being equal, your business is going to be worth X. That is not to say, however, your business is going to be sold for X. Because ultimately, like I say, circling right back to the start of this, it's only going to be worth as much as a buyer is prepared to pay for it.
Definitely. And there's a certain element of detaching the kind of emotional side of if you've started the business, especially, you've probably got, attachment to maybe a certain department of the business you've put a lot of energy into, or just, family business.
It's also,
how do you value emotions?
Yeah.
And also, it's like for a lot of business owners who are looking to realize their wealth by selling their business, it's a big psychological challenge for a lot of business owners because the business is their identity. It's part of their ego. So to let go of part of your identity, even if you are getting a wonderful strategic purchase price, let's say you're just getting the dream buyer, even then, how does money compensate the death of your identity? That's the challenge, right? Like the challenge for most business owners, I would even say the challenge for most people in life, is that if your identity is bound up with what it is that you do, right? And in the case of business owner, let's say it's such a deep relationship, business ownership. If you run it like we've been running this business 30 years, right? It's really the idea that one day we won't be business owners of this business is a huge psychological challenge. So the challenge for business owners is to kind of have some kind of, when it comes to selling their business and realizing their wealth, and it's an important event, right? It's to somehow detach and allow the business to have its own identity without you. And that is the biggest challenge for business owners.
And we try and structure that in Value Right. We look at how the cash flow is generated in terms of not just the net profit, but add backs, kind of allowable, admittable add backs like the owner's salary or owner's relative salary, etc. This is the cash flow that ultimately you're selling on. So you've got to start framing yourself as a business owner as a custodian of an engine of cash flow. And that is a detachment in my mind, that you are the custodian and owner of that engine. Yeah. Now, if that engine is too enmeshed and attached to you, because say the business can't operate and run without you, then you've got to make some changes before you sell that business.
And a good example of that, classic example, that a lot of viewers watching this podcast who are probably only now just understanding what buying and selling a business means, is the hair salon. Like we all know that, or a barber, that you go to the barber shop, you go to the hair salon because of the stylist or the person that cuts your hair, right? Now, if they are selling the hair salon, right? For example, this happens. What happens to the client base, the customers that are seeing that guy week in, week out, month in, month out? Often what happens is that person who sells the shop, it often moves to another location and then takes the client base with him or her. So the hair salon is only as valuable as the person that's cutting your hair. And if he's not there anymore, so they become notoriously difficult businesses to sell. What you're really selling with a hair salon is the site, potentially, or even the idea that the people are coming to the brand of the salon, not necessarily the stylist. So when you see these very successful hair salon franchises, you know what you're getting because of the brand. Does that make sense?
And product ranges, right? So they detach the personality by creating products that may carry the name of the hairstylist, but it's actually the product that's being bought and sold. And the monetization is through that product. So there are ways and means of being able to depersonalize and make it less owner-centric.
Yeah, and so if you owned a hair salon and you were selling it, you would have to go through a really strategic process of how can I make this sellable by detaching the business's reliance upon me as the business owner.
Sounds kind of counterintuitive that you've kind of got to make yourself redundant to try and sell the business, because from a buyer's perspective, it's a lot more high risk, isn't it? If everything is wrapped up in one client or the owner themselves, but to try and sort of detach that is, definitely.
But it can be done. That's the point. Like, it just requires a bit of thought process, and it requires you to be aware and conscious of it. And that's the whole point. That's what we're doing with Businesses for Sale. Beyond just being a listings website, we are introducing people to this process.
I suppose maybe a good test of how independent the business can run. Sort of go on holiday for a couple of weeks and see if anything catches fire, and then you can come back.
Yeah, or go away for 2 months. Like, can the business owners just disappear for 2 months? Andrew, I think you and I should just take a 2-month holiday, and just as a test for the business.
After 30 years, I think we may learn to.
I was going to ask earlier. So the business has just turned 30. Do you guys remember your 30th birthdays and how you celebrated? How did it compare to the business turning 30?
I was in the white heat of startup at the time, so I have a vague memory of having some sort of celebration in Exmouth Market, which was very near our old office, there's a lovely Greek restaurant there, the Colossi, I think it's called. Lovely. Don't know if it's still there, And then in the evening, I think I visited the server room to go and change a couple of hard drives. That's how it was back then. Of course, the advent of cloud and hosting in the cloud, those days are long gone. But they certainly weren't the days back in the day. You'd have to roll your sleeves up and get in the server room to ensure that uptime was up.
A birthday party in the server room.
Yeah.
How about you, Marcus?
I do remember it, weirdly. And it was kind of like last minute ad hoc. I'm not one for birthdays, actually. I'm not one for celebrating my own birthday. But I do remember a friend saying, look, we have to go out. It's your 30th. I went, okay. And we ended up at Brown's in the West End. I don't know if you know that restaurant. It's still there. Yeah. And it was just impromptu. But it's interesting. Like, that was in 2001. I mean, I'm giving my age away now. Terribly. And but I do remember it, and it was just a very casual affair. I do remember we were talking about AOL, weirdly, at the time, because do you remember AOL was running a huge advertising campaign with Connie? Do you remember? She was like this figure. You don't even remember it, do you?
I do vaguely.
And then she was like this
avatar type.
She was kind of like this character that AOL were using to promote AOL. And I weirdly remember Connie of AOL being a topic of conversation round that table. So, yeah, it was very much, even back then, the conversation was internet.
And then lastly, kind of looking to the future in the next 30 years. So we spoke a bit about the emergence of AI and kind of where we're at now. How do you see AI changing the business buying process? What do you think buyers and sellers need to know?
Well, for me, AI is going to change every process, and buying and selling a business will be no different from every other process on earth in terms of how AI will impact those processes. I mean, for me, it's about getting in-depth knowledge and detailed knowledge in and around the buying and selling process that otherwise was quite obscured and hidden from the world. It wasn't easily found. You'd have to go through consultants and that were, quite esoteric in how they treat that information. So there's a liberalization of information and knowledge, which I think can only mean a good thing because people have become more informed about the buying and selling process of a business. In terms of actually finding the opportunities. I agree with what Marcus was saying. That can't be something that AI can second guess about you. You've got to discover that through a discovery process, like going onto marketplaces like businessesforsale.com and have your interest piqued. That might be helped and guided by AI, but ultimately it's the opportunities that do the work for that.
How about you, Marcus? How do you think AI might change business buying?
I think it will empower people. I think that there's a lot of fear about AI. It's almost treated like an alien species that's come to compete with humanity, and it's who's going to dominate. Is it going to be humans or is it going to be AIs? It's nothing like that. I think that to me is almost like a Luddite response, or the response of people that were frightened that the horse and carriage business would go out of business because of automobiles. AI is a prosthetic for human cognition, right? It is there to empower what we already have. My own experience of AI is completely radical. The way I use it, the way I integrate it with my life. And I see AI and humanity working together to create the optimal plan for whatever it is. So if you're buying a business and you're using AI, it's probably going to help you dramatically understand what you are, who you are, and what business you kind of want to buy. And it probably will point you to businessesforsale.com. And it already does, because businessforsale.com is trusted. You know, it's a trusted companion for those looking to buy a business. And it's also a trusted companion to those looking to sell a business. The thing about AI is it will not allow for inauthenticity. And you've got to be nakedly transparent now in this world, because AI is wholly driven by getting you to the truth, or whatever the truth is. And I'm very much an optimist in that. So I think it'll be a huge tool. And I think in the way that I've integrated myself with AI in how I run my business, in how I organize my life, even down to just as an example, this is really interesting, right? Last couple of summer holidays, the family have been going to Mediterranean just for a couple of weeks in the summer, and it's been too hot. So I plugged into AI, look, where'd you suggest? It actually said Beirut, which was basically on the Atlantic side in south of France. Cooler. And then gave me the temperature, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I remember going to Beirut in 1989, interrailing. In fact, it was the bicentenary of the French Revolution that night, and I slept on the beach. True story, right? And with school friends, I was like 18. And I remember thinking, wow, I never imagined I'd ever go back to Beirut. So I investigated Beirut with AI, found some interesting hotels, and then found that there's a whole surf culture, which I didn't even know. And you're close to San Sebastian on the Spanish side. It's Basque country. There was these amazing lagoons a drive away. And suddenly I'm thinking, wow, this is a whole new holiday experience that I would never have even considered, because it was either Cyprus or Greece, maybe Italy. Cyprus, Greece, Italy. Cyprus, Greece. You know what I mean? And then suddenly I'm like thinking North Atlantic side. That is a real world example of me working with AI, because obviously I've got kids now that are surfing, so they can do a bit of surfing there, which I'd never even thought of. And I think that's how people will work with AI, that it will just nudge them towards the perfect solution for their lives. But you're only going to get out of AI what you put into it.
And we want to kind of be the business buying equivalent of that, where you look and you go, oh, there's a clockmakers in the Caribbean somewhere, or windsurfing school or something like that.
Knowledge is power, right? Yeah. I mean, that doesn't change with AI. It just increases that whole.
But premise. I still, interestingly, went to a travel agent to book the holiday. That's the point. Like, I took all my information
for now.
No, but I still would use that travel agent because it was the travel agent that said, oh, it was actually the travel agent that said San Sebastian, one way, Lagoon, you should do a day trip here. And it was the travel agent that said, we should get you into this hotel. And it was the travel agent that said, you really need to hire a car. And I said, I don't want to hire a car. And they said, okay, fine. Then on these days, we'll get you a taxi booked. So I worked again. Like the travel agent benefited from my use of AI.
Yeah, and I think AI is going to change the way businesses operate and function. And we're seeing that in our own business, not just merely by everyone having a ChatGPT account, a kind of corporate ChatGPT account, and us pooling our knowledge across the company in a centralized way and using AI to work better with that knowledge. But in terms of how we actually produce the site, how the code is made for the site, AI is impacting pretty much every strata of the business's makeup today, even through to product development and ideation, all AI assisted. And I think the really big kind of AI bomb that's gone off in our company is probably Codex, which is our preferred AI assisted coding tool that we're using. And it's really only been a couple of months that the sophistication of Codex is such that it has had a huge impact in understanding our existing code base, which runs to the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and thus for us to be able to refactor that code and to get products out quicker, etc. So really exciting times. And I'd also say that how we ourselves are having to think of how AI can be brought to bear right front and center within our product proposition as well. That bit is the bit that takes, I think, the longest time, because you are really transforming your business from what was pre-AI to one that has to work in a world that is competitive and useful in a world of AI.
And as you know, I'm using AI to restructure our marketing strategy, and it's mind-blowing. It's been mind-blowing. Like what working very closely, and I use a file system on ChatGPT. So I load up a file with as many documents, and I put a lot of time into prompting and developing a culture within that file system before I then engage on. And the only way to compare it, it's like the way it feels for me, it's like having a team of MBA graduates who've just graduated from Harvard or INSEAD in your pocket. And it's like working with a team of consultants that can give you like the kind of advice I'm getting. We know you'd pay tens and tens of thousands of pounds to get a consultant in from one of the big management consultant companies to sit. The interviewing process, for example, is months, right? The consultant needs to know you, interview you, get to know your business. AI kind of does that in minutes if you feed it. So I feed it all our board packs, I feed it all our documentation, I feed it my email conversations, I feed it and feed it and feed it. That's kind of like the interview process that a consultant would do with you before the consultant comes in and says, right, this is what you need to do. That can happen in days.
Definitely. And kind of keeping how AI is going to change everything in mind, where do you see the next 30 years of BFS going, just as a kind of wrap-up final question?
I mean, I think it's a family business. I want to keep it a family business. Andrew and I are family-led as people. And I think what Andrew and I have established is those first 30 years. We've built an amazing team of people, some of which have been with us like decades, right?
Almost as long as 30 years.
Yeah. And so I like to see it continue. Now, we have options, right? One of them could be that we continue building the business and then take the company public, as it were. Because then what you're doing is you're inviting the corporate culture into the business. Andrew and I know how to run and grow a solid, stable, reliable family business, right? There's no doubt in my mind that this could be a very dominant platform in the future. So one of the options we have as a family is to seek that route at some point. I don't think it's now. We're still relatively young for what we've done. Don't forget, how old were you 30 years ago?
Well, I was 21.
21. So you're talking about
20.
you're talking about you're talking about like a business that's been run by someone who started it when he was 20. It's ridiculous. So we've still got time on our side before we even make that move. But it could be a move that we make in 15 years' time, for example.
I think if you think of how the business has evolved with the alignment of how the technology landscape's changed over the last 30 years, and we've been through those different eons, pre-broadband, broadband, mobile, the rise of Google, etc. And the technologies that effectively have complemented the growth of the web, and no doubt broadband, and the increase in bandwidth around broadband, and the speed, the lower latency, responsiveness of devices, the mobile, etc. We've lived through all that. I think AI will mean that our relationship with the buyer and the seller just get deeper. They have to, and that is the beyond classified sentiment, I think, that we as a business need to evolve into. I think every business will need to evolve into that. It just needs to be smarter at adding value through the whole life cycle of the buying and selling process. So that's what we're looking forward to assisting. So moving into the space of more platform or out from classified listings marketplace is probably the big transformational step the business has to take.
Well, maybe we'll see you guys here for the 60th birthday podcast in 3 decades' time then.
Yeah.
How old will I be? Oh, yeah. It's possible.
Mathematically possible.
All right, we'll put it in the calendar.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Marcus and Andrew, and thanks for watching the first episode of the businessisforsale.com podcast. We're going to have more regular episodes coming in the coming weeks and months, so keep an eye out, and thank you for watching. Thanks, guys, for joining me.